So if we go to our little cards menu here, this is where you can configure a whole series of sort of global capabilities, and then subsequently drill down into per site or per device. But I wanted to talk about a couple of things. So first of all, we have this concept of extensions inside Central, and think of these similar to browser extensions that you may deploy on your browser, or if some of you are familiar with ClearPass and our ClearPass extensions that we have. What this allows us to do is effectively connect to third-party applications, software solutions that allow us to get additional context about the devices and what's going on in your, across your network. So, in this case, we've got Microsoft Intune. Why is it important to connect to Microsoft Intune? Well, because as we're creating NAC policies, we may want to use some information that Intune has in order to put the users into the correct role, the correct profile, give them access, deny access, change the access that they may have. So whether, if a device is managed, what version it's running, is it in compliance, those sorts of things. And we have this capability with Microsoft Intune. We're working on, VMware Workspace ONE, a few others out there. You can see we've got integrations with, with Splunk, with vCenter, and a whole series of other ones that, that certainly, if you have any other questions about third parties, we can follow up on. These are configured very, very simply. Every kind of third-party solution will have some sort of a URL, a client ID, and a secret. So you configure that, and then Central is connected to those sources of context to enable us to make more granular and sophisticated and real-time decisions, right? Because remember, one of the key tenets from a NAC and zero trust perspective is you don't just allow a device or a user onto the network and then you forget about them, right? During a user session, something may happen that puts them out of compliance, and we want to know about that straight away, right? So we don't want to, it's not a sort of a polling mechanism where, every hour we might check to see if something's changed. We've got these real-time capabilities. So the second Intune detects a change in the posture of a device, can send that back to Central NAC. We can reevaluate a policy and decide whether we need to treat that user or that device in a different kind of way. So if I click on the NAC card, you'll see we all start off with basically a monitoring view. Let's go back a few days. So we can see here, I've got lots of useful information in terms of the authentications that are happening, the identity stores that we're connecting to, what sites are doing the most authentications. I can sort of split this up between users, clients, which means devices. So that's typically your IoT sorts of devices, or your guests and visitors. So you have a very quick sort of NOC dashboard kind of view of what's going on from a NAC and authentication perspective. If I jump into the configuration, this is how we start, building up and constructing our policies. So it all starts with our authentication sources. So in this case, we've got the ability to connect to either Google Workspace, Microsoft Entra ID, or Okta Workforce, which covers, pretty much all of the kind of identity stores that our customers, will incorporate. And you can add multiple ones of these as well, right? So certainly we have customers that do mergers and acquisitions, or that have got multiple companies under an umbrella organization, and you may be connecting to multiple Entra ID tenants or Workspace or Okta. So you can have, as many of these identity sources defined, which allows you to connect to them, and then you can create policy based specifically on that particular identity store. So you may only allow people, even if they meet all of these other posture conditions and they've got Intune installed and whatever it might be, but if their account is in one particular Entra ID tenant versus another one, you may want to allow or deny or control the access that person has. Pretty standard stuff from a configuration perspective. Again, you've got secrets, tenant IDs, client IDs. Pretty standard stuff in terms of how to connect, and we've got user guides to help you with these kinds of requirements. So now that I know where my identity sources are, I want to be able to configure the authentication to those identity stores. So we can see here how we can create a profile. Let's have a look at this this one here. It's a EAP-based network. We're going to be using it. This one is purely for our wired users, right? We're going to be using this particular identity store. Again, you can select multiple identity stores or just a particular single one. If you are looking at doing actual onboarding and provisioning of devices, so whether it's a BYOD use case that you want to, do a one-time provisioning of a device, or even if it's a sort of corporate-owned device, but maybe not managed with Intune or not managed by some other, EMM solution, you may want to provision these. We have this in universities and lots of different types of scenarios. So, this URL, if it's not a managed device where you're doing the provisioning again through Intune or something similar, this URL, you can obviously email it out to people or provide it on the intranet, and what that guides them through is a process to effectively onboard their device. So I'm working on a Mac here at the moment, so it's taking me through the workflow for onboarding, my Mac device, which sort of involves a little shell application that helps with doing all of the provisioning of the certificates and the SSIDs and the networks that it's connecting to, so that you have a self-service mechanism for users to onboard themselves onto that network. A couple of other things, you can use sort of the default certificates that are inside inside Aruba Central, or you can select your own custom certificates, which is useful if you've already got certificates deployed on endpoints, or if you've got your own PKI that you're leveraging. And you can see here all of the various options to copy and paste the server keys and the intermediate CAs and all of that typical stuff, your OCSP checks, and whether you want to reject authentications if the OCSP check fails, those kinds of things as well, which is great. So that's configuring the authentication to the identity stores that we defined earlier. Actually, just one thing I did forget with the identity management is we do have a MAC address identity store. So we know lots of customers, whether it's for IoT devices or other devices on the network, you may want to upload, import from a CSV if you've got a whole, list of those, so that you can use that in policy in addition to whatever other context you may have. You may want to enforce, MAC authentication, or it may just be MAC authentication because that particular device doesn't support 802.1x and various EAP methods. So we've got our authentication servers, we've got our authentication profiles, and now we get into the authorization policies. So remember, authentication is, from a security perspective, is still a binary event. You either get it right or you get it wrong. And so just because you got you've got a valid certificate or a valid MAC address or something else, that doesn't necessarily give you enough granularity in terms of what access you want to provide onto the network. And so you've got the ability to create these authorization policies that allow you to set a whole different set of conditions in terms of how we're going to evaluate what role or what policies we apply to this particular device. So in this case, we're saying, okay, well, you've got to authenticate using ETLS, and you've got to belong to the corporate user group inside the company here. But in addition, we're going to say, well, this is a policy for managed corporate-owned devices. And so through that extension integration to Intune, we want to make sure that this device is a corporate-owned, and in addition, that it is compliant, in a compliant state. So, that whatever policies you've defined in Intune, making sure that that device still meets those conditions. And as you can see here, with the way that the navigation is done, what you select here in terms of the condition will populate different capabilities or different attributes that you can select within that authorization rule. So as you can see here, our various Intune rules. So is it corporate owned? Is it compliant? Is it marked as a BYOD device? Is it in supervised mode? Similar, whether it's with Jamf, is it managed or supervised? With Workspace ONE. These tags, some of these are system tags, depending on the integration point. And some of them can be user-defined tags, right? So, typically a lot of customers will use our client profiling capabilities to tag if this device is a IoT audio-visual device, or if it's an industrial IoT sensor, then put them into this particular role, and that role will control what access policies they have, maybe what VLANs they're allowed to access, what QoS profiles they may have, those kinds of things. So you can layer multiple conditions. You can sort of make this as sort of simple or as complicated, depending on your requirements. Obviously, you can either allow or deny access, and place people into a specific role. So if we have a look here at an IoT example, the AV systems. So if the client category is equal to audio video, and now we're adding a different condition here to say, hey, actually, I want to make sure though that these audio video devices are behaving in a consistent way to their baseline. And what does that mean? As Raf mentioned earlier, we've got a big data lake where we're able to, to store and sort of mine the telemetry about the types of devices that are connecting and what they're doing. And if you've got let's just say you've got a TV in a conference room, and normally it sort of, maybe transfers, 500 megabytes of data across a given day because it's a busy system. And then all of a sudden, one day we detect that actually this device has been uploading gigabytes of data or downloading gigabytes of data. That can be, that's a deviation from the baseline. And so we may want to, make that a condition that prevents that device from connecting, generate an alert so that the administrator can see, okay, what's going on here? Is this an abnormal event due to potential insider threat, or something's been compromised? And you can then obviously remediate that or take the appropriate action. So there's quite a lot of flexibility in terms of the layering of those conditions, as we call them.